Hello, my name is Aidan Hennessey, and today I'll be talking about transportation in Watertown, New York, a lot of the problems with the transportation in Watertown, New York, the history and context that has led up to our current situation, and my proposed solution or partial solution to some of the problems we've accumulated in Watertown. But first, I'd like to talk to you about the history of Watertown. Watertown is a very historic city. Watertown was settled along the Black River, which made it an ideal spot for industry. We had lots of mills, which allowed us to harness the energy of the Black River to our benefit. As you become an industrial power, you gain rails to service that industrial sector. We became a rail hub for the North Country, which is our section of New York. We connected major hubs north of Watertown, like Plattsburgh and Ogdensburg, Kingston and Ontario, and Quebec, as well as places south, like Utica and Syracuse. And from Utica or Syracuse, you could get pretty much anywhere in the country at one point. It is claimed that at one point, Watertown had the most millionaires per capita in any city in America. Though I couldn't find any sources to support this, it was proposed to me by one of the city librarians, historians. It's also settled very close to Fort Drum, which is a military base, one of the largest in the Northeast. We get many soldiers every year that come and go, and they do a lot of their business in Watertown, more so now than at any point in its history. We also had many different transit systems. As you can see in the background of this photo, it is our trolley system, which was a little bit of a mystery as I went to research transportation systems in Watertown, New York. I talked to historians and people who worked at newspapers and the references department, and no one could give me a map of where the trolley went. All we knew is that it went through Public Square and then into the north side of Watertown, but no one could find me a map. Now we see that it went to Seawall Island, Glen Park, through the Public Square, and up to Brownville, which is just a little piece of solved history to me, which I think is very cool. This was a map I had gotten from our city's references department. Highlighted in orange here are the old rails that at one point came through the city and served as a hub. Here you can see where the train hub was, and there's also another line that I didn't get to highlight when I made this graph. But these trails led to the greater community, such as Carthage and Utica and Syracuse, as well as east to Sackett's Harbor and north to Quebec. I apologize. West to Sackett's Harbor, not east to Sackett's Harbor, east to Carthage. And this is Seawall Island. Pay close attention to this rail because this will be central to my proposition later. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the modern context of what's happened in Watertown in the last 50 years. So Watertown has transitioned its economy from a largely industry-based economy to finance as well as retail. And it services both Watertown and the surrounding area, which includes Fort Drum, as mentioned earlier. This economy and that servicing of the larger community has created an effect similar to sprawl, where a lot of people participating in our economy come from outside the community. We don't have buses that leave Watertown and travel outside of the community. So they all come in cars. So that is part of the reason that Watertown has become so dependent on cars as transportation. This dependence on outside communities is largely because of a wealth disparity between Watertown and the surrounding area. You have very wealthy areas like Sackett's Harbor, which is a historic city west of Watertown, as well as Fort Drum, which services a lot of soldiers. And you can see here in the background what I mean by servicing this larger community. You have Watertown, which serves as a finance and retail hub, but you also have these much smaller communities like Black River, Felts Mills. Well, you can see where I was working on my presentation. I was actually at the Black River Trail, which will come which will be a part of this presentation a little bit later. So you can see here the larger community that's served by Watertown. Another reason that we're very dependent on cars is because we have extreme weather conditions for a large portion of the year. It is incredibly snowy here. It's because you get a lot of this lake effect that Tug Hill Plateau, and then we get what is called lake effect snow, and it is something to experience. Luckily, we haven't gotten any of it yet. But all of those factors together have led to a very hostile environment for multimodal forms of transportation. Now, what are some of the solutions that are currently being used to alleviate these problems in Watertown? Very recently, our busing program has gotten a huge expansion in terms of the number of routes, in terms of the number of buses, in terms of the studies to most effectively service the community. And these were very successful. People really liked these, and some people didn't like it because it primarily serviced the poor of the city, but we don't worry about those people. These investments were very successful. However, after these investments were made, COVID struck, and it was devastating to this investment. Recent changes have been made across the city to improve multimodal transportation. This includes the expansion of trail networks, as well as including biking lanes, and a lot of smart street tactics, which is discussed in our city's vision plan. Most recently, as of, I believe, 2016, there was a renovation of Factory Street, and we saw a lot of these improvements that we hoped to see, though it was still very lacking. If you were to see a picture of it, it's very lacking. It has very narrow bike lanes. As a matter of fact, when I was driving it just the other day, and I realized I was parked directly in a bike lane, so a biker would not have been able to get through, and it was somewhat of a necessity. And these are things that obviously need to be improved. I am proposing a trail both for walking and biking that utilizes the fact that Watertown connects a lot of municipalities. It'll also be taking advantage of those rails I had shown earlier that are now abandoned, and the property is owned by the city or state government. As you can see, the purple line here is the part that is within Watertown's limits. It would be in two portions, one a Calcium portion and a Watertown portion. I will obviously be focusing on the Watertown portion, but to be true, as ambitious as I would like to be, I'd like to turn the trail as far as the rail goes, and have this whole trail network into Calcium, connecting the two cities. In this slide, I'm comparing it to another project that exists in Jefferson County, the Black River Trail, which converted another one of our rail lines, one of the two that split, as you saw in the earlier map. This trail is incredibly popular, and it has been very recently expanded. You can see that one line labeled A to B is the original trail network, and this other line is an extension to that trail network in order to try and integrate it into the larger community. As you can see here on the map, if I could just get my pointer. Whoop, sorry. Here we can see, it doesn't show up on the map, but the Black River Trail extension leads into a park. There are also parks here and here. Ideally, we could have an extension of the trail, of the route, onto Route 3, which would service, as you can see here, a clip from our city's vision plan. Expand complete street measures to parks, trails, and to open space to encourage connectivity within and in between neighborhoods. Continue to implement the citywide sidewalk measure. ensures safe, repaired sidewalks in place. Sorry. And I think that my project does a great job encompassing communities and increases the connectivity. It would also be a huge gateway to opening the downtown Thompson Park, as well as the Black River Trail, and finally connect our trail networks, which I will discuss later in the project. But as I said earlier, just to draw a little bit more on the comparisons to the Black River Trail, the Black River Trail ties together two very important communities in Watertown, which is veterans and the elderly. The Black River Trail is very popular among veterans who come from Fort Drum and use it to exercise or bike, and it's very rare not to see someone on the trail at a given time. It truly is very popular, and it connects the community of Black River and parts of Fort Drum to Watertown, which very much in line with what I would like to do. Yep. And so how can we organize the communities in Watertown to support this project and bring it into existence? I recognize that we have deeply ingrained problems in our transportation systems in Watertown, and that another trail is not an end-all be-all solution to this problem. However, I think it's important to realistically set our expectations, and that we need to meet people where they are in terms of their willingness to solve this problem that we have. Similar projects in Watertown already exist and are extremely popular, as I had just talked about the Black River Trail, which ties together the very important communities in Watertown and is very popular with many of them. So I have a couple of interviews. I will be speaking with Curtis Mosley, who is a cyclist and runs the Bearing Jiu-Jitsu School. He's also a veteran, and so I thought he very well encompassed one of the communities I think it's very important to satisfy, because they would be the primary beneficiary of this project. I will also be doing an interview with the man who owns our local bike shop, Todd Phelps. And he is a local to the area. And I think together they both represent the communities that could come together to make this a reality. Apologize in advance for my terrible camera work and my absolutely obnoxious laughter, and for YouTube's stupid ads.
It got me into biking. I started biking.
I apologize. I would like to preface this with, I asked him why he started biking, and this was the answer he gave me.
Exercise from jiu-jitsu. Knees for 24 years in the military, kind of banged up a little bit, so running is not advantageous to me. So I took up biking, and I used to just bike to the school from my house, which was like 13 miles.
So here he talked about why he took up biking and why it's important and attracts a lot of veterans. Another important thing that he had said was that he utilized his bike for transportation to get to and from the gym that he runs. Here I ask him a couple of questions. I ask him about the different routes he likes to take and whether he varies them or not. And he had some very interesting things to say about the problems with the culture that would lead him to stick to very specific routes due to safety. And he also discussed the community of people who gather around these trails and how these people meet. So
I
let's just
diversify and mix them up, but I have some known routes that are pretty good as far as safe, because cell phones, everybody's talking on the cell phone, and you got to worry about people getting hit. So I try to stay one that's got like larger shoulders and everything like that, but for the most part, I got some routes that I know, and every once in a while I'll explore a new route. But I map it out and look at it on a satellite view to make sure it's a good road and everything, good shoulder. So.
Do you ever ride on the Black River Trail?
I have a couple times. Yeah, there's a segment that goes from right there where it starts to the very end. There's like different time trials. You got King of the Mountain and stuff like that. So through Strava, it's kind of like a Facebook for bicyclists or walking whatever. So you can see who's in there. I met a lot of people that way. I'm like, hey, one of the guys in there is Gil. He's a really good rider. Like, hey, Gil, I beat your time today. He'll go back and beat it. And we kind of stay competitive that way in a friendly nature, but nobody's out like there's no points for it. There's nothing like that. Kind of just bragging rights.
Do you see any group in particular out on the trails?
Yeah, Reese's Bike and Black River, they have group rides sometimes. I don't really do a whole lot of group rides just because
And there he had talked about Strava, which, like he said, is a social media group for bikers and outdoors people to get together and discuss their racing. He also discussed the problems with the local culture, how drivers are very inconsiderate towards bikers, which may lead you to stick to safe routes and having to scope out your routes and really be careful as a biker in this community. He later in this interview, which I will show you, he discusses some bike races that are that I feel would incorporate the communities I'm looking for, elderly people and veterans, due to the increasing age of people living in Watertown. Again, this is just incorporating the communities that I think are likely to make this happen.
kind of lost in my thoughts, listen to nature or whatever, even when I ride to Syracuse. No music, just me.
I would also like to apologize for the Nickelback in the background of this interview.
Just riding. It's peaceful that way. I did a veterans ride for my dad. I did with my old sergeant major. That was fun, but then he did leave me in the dust for a while. He just got his in moment, and he was gone. I think we were coming to Brownville, and he was gone. Turned around and looked, and he was like 3-4 miles ahead of me. He was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I got in the moment." So my thing is, I don't want anybody to feel they have to speed up to me, and I don't want to feel like I have to speed up to somebody else or like mess their ride up. I did a high school ride for the seniors, gained a lot of popularity, surprisingly. I had one kid ride with me. He asked about, at first I was like, don't really have anybody ride with me. He's asking about times. I'm like, I'm just riding. I got to get the 78 miles in, whether it takes me all day or not. And he rode, and it was pretty fun. At least to have somebody that kept me motivated too, because it was a pretty tough ride. It kept me motivated. So
You had just spoke about a veterans ride.
yeah.
Do you know of other groups of bikers? You had also talked about seniors group. What types of groups form around
There's just
cycling?
different bike groups around the area you can get with. Like on Strava, people say, hey, let's get together and ride this day or whatever. There's a couple of different bike groups. There's some biking teams also that do training, but they're out there competing. So you can always find somebody to ride with if you want somebody to ride with. But like I said, for me, I just prefer to ride alone, not being antisocial, but it's just that clear my mind moment. I don't really want to talk a whole lot. I just want to ride, enjoy the moment. So
Sweet. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
all right, no problem.
Other important things that come from that is the fact that these trails, they bring community together. Like he said, just important stuff. And again, connecting through Strava, and connecting these groups that would be the primary beneficiaries of these kinds of trails.
Yeah,
Sorry, I keep pressing the space bar thinking it's going to send me to the next slide, but it just keeps. So the next interview we'll be seeing is from Todd Phelps. He is the owner of the Black River Adventure Shop. Full disclosure, he's my uncle, and he is still way too cool for me. He is a huge inspiration as to why I did this project. He is an outdoorsman through and through, and he gives just a lot of really good information. So I'll be playing this interview mostly intact, because it's got a lot of really good information, maybe pausing to give a little bit of commentary in the middle of it.
So you were saying about the folks who initially proposed the Black River Trail.
Right. So, my first contact with it was through a guy that was a forest ranger at the time, David Larrabee. He's also very active in the Black River chapter of the Adirondack Mountain Club. And through his position with the DEC, he learned that the New York State had purchased that old railroad right away.
Just to pause here, he had just brought up two groups of outdoorsy people who I think would be perfect to organize to make this trail a reality. These groups are in abundance here, and they're people who are would be very willing to help, even if they have no investment in terms of multimodality transportation in Watertown. Again, just finding people where they are as opposed to where we would like them to be.
And they were looking for ideas of what to do with it,
Full screen.
how to improve it. And so he came into the shop hoping that I would support it and sign his petition. And so, of course, I had questions because at the time we were mountain biking as the old railroad grade. But it had problems as a mountain bike trail, like a lot of things do, in that there were bridges that were missing. And so I asked him what they intended to do with it, what he was hoping that the state would do with it. And he thought that they should pave it. And when I heard that, to his surprise, I was on board. Because the area really needed a place to take your kid to learn how to ride a bike. It needed a place to rollerblade. And I was perfectly willing to give up the mediocre mountain biking for a place that, you know, the entire area could support and utilize. So not only did I sign his petition, but I actually carried the petition and got another 220 people or so.
Like I had mentioned earlier, a lot of community support for this initial project, which is very similar to our own. I'm sorry if I haven't made the connection between the Black River Trail and this project. I'm sorry if I haven't driven that connection home enough, but they're very similar projects, and I think it'd be very easy to draw comparisons to each. And I think it would be easier to bring this into existence, especially when you can point to a success like the Black River Trail.
Sweet. So folks, it sounds like people were really excited when we got the Black River Trail. If you got 200 signatures.
Well, I got 200 people to sign up, but they were all very active outdoorsy people. I went to a couple of meetings in support of it, and a lot of people did show up that were opposed. They owned property on the other side of the river or at one or the other ends, and they all had concerns about, kids over there partying and that sort of
God forbid there be anything fun to do in this town for people under 30.
thing. So it took a little bit of convincing, but almost everybody went along with it. So yeah, and obviously if you look at it now, there's always somebody over there doing it. It's a very popular trail.
So popular that it's been expanded pretty recently, or at least not the Black River Trail proper, but extensions to trail networks.
Yeah, from its original 3.9 miles, they've added another mile and a half or so, bringing it farther and farther into town, into Watertown, and with the hopes and expectations of actually bringing it all the way into town and through town, getting out to Jefferson Community College and the trail system that they have over there.
Is recreational biking a gateway into biking for transportation?
Well, in some cases, yes. If you're going to ride your bike to work, if you're going to commute on it, obviously you need a bike, and you have to enjoy riding.
Mhm.
But there are a lot of other things that also have to happen. It has to be a decent distance. The road conditions have to be good. You have to have facilities at work that, a shower in some cases if it's going to be a long, hard ride, a place to store your bike, a locker to keep clothing and whatnot, so that you can do that effectively.
Would you say Watertown is a bike-friendly city?
No. They are trying.
Mhm.
A lot of the people in the city government have been doing their best over the years.
Mhm.
When the opportunity comes along, like a few years ago, they added bike lanes on Washington Street out by the high school.
Mhm.
When they redid Factory Street, they added wider lanes so that they could have a shared lane for bicycles. And of course, the aforementioned addition to the Black River Trail.
Mhm.
And so I think the final plan includes a way to get over to Thompson Park and even go out of town to the south. So they're adding on, they're hoping to be more and more bike friendly, but there's hundreds of years of not so bike friendly construction, and that makes it difficult to alter anything.
What do you think leads to this hostile culture towards biking and pedestrians?
No, well, I think most of it's unintentional. I
Mhm.
mean, the infrastructure has been built strictly with cars in mind. And that just leads to there's not a place for the bike. And so the bike and the biker ends up in the lane, and if a driver is scared, they become hostile.
Mhm.
And they become scared of hitting somebody and hurting somebody. And so they don't want them around. So, yeah, they become hostile toward any improvements that might bring more biking. They become hostile toward the bikes themselves. So, yeah, a lot of it is the infrastructure, but it's also the mentality. If you don't understand why somebody's out there doing it, then you don't have a lot of respect and compassion for them.
Mhm.
If you are a cyclist, then obviously you give those people a lot more room and you understand why they're there.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Very well.
All right. As you can see, just a wealth of information from him. Just to summarize some of those points, the Black River Trail, very popular. Initially had a groundswell of support from a very small community, but now services and brings together a much greater community, connecting Watertown and Black River and Fort Drum. And it's been so popular that they're expanding it, and it plans to be part of a larger network which connects a lot of the parks. Funny enough, he mentioned Thompson Park, which I forgot to mention earlier in the presentation, was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted's company, which I think is very neat. And I just found out very recently, which just goes to show the wealth that Watertown once had as an industrial power. Okay, so in conclusion, we're coming here at the end of the project. The history of Watertown, we were very wealthy, industrial. We are now largely doing the business of finance and retail to the larger community. This economic shift has caused cultural, geographic, and demographic shifts. Those demographic shifts I didn't speak to as much as I would have liked to at the beginning of the presentation. Watertown's population is increasingly aging, we were at one point, the majority of our population was peak earners from 45 or from 30 to 50. Our largest growing population is now those retiring. Peak earners and retiring are quickly growing, as well as the increase in veterans, as Watertown's population is slowly declining from this economic loss. Just something I that had slipped my mind earlier in the presentation. And as those shifts have occurred, it's created a complex and difficult situation for multimodal transportation. Things are very hostile for biking and pedestrian culture, which is why you don't see a lot of it, despite a lot of the city's efforts to make the city more walkable. Very recently, there was a downtown revitalization initiative, and it did a lot of work to try and make the city a little more walkable, and it also helped pay for a lot of those changes mentioned earlier in the presentation relating to bike lanes and renovations. My presentation, or my project to have a trail from Watertown to Calcium falls in line with the city's recent goals and actions in expanding the Black River Trail and trying to interconnect our parks and trails. And similar projects like the Black River Trail are very popular and have broad support from a lot of the communities in Watertown. Not just outdoorsy people, even though they were the primary people who really got the ball rolling on the Black River Trail, but also veterans and the elderly and young people as well. I'd like to give a special thanks to the Watertown Public Library References Department. They gave me a lot of information on our historical transit systems, as well as talking to me about how urban renewal has changed our city, partially for the better, partially for the worse. I'd like to thank the Watertown Historical Society for a lot of the photos of Watertown that were used in this presentation, as well as information on the transportation systems and the railroad. The Watertown Daily Times for some of the other photos used in the presentation, and the Watertown Planning Department, who were very kind in providing me files, and a lot of the information from the slide from the show comes from the city vision plan, which is a document they sent to me very kindly. And of course, my interviewees, Curtis Mosley, the greatest jiu-jitsu coach north of Syracuse, and Todd Phelps, owner of the Black River Adventurers Shop, and my uncle. Full disclosure. Okay. Thank you very much. This has been my presentation. I hope you all liked it. And please have a nice day.